Welcome back to Beautiful Disasters. I'm so glad to welcome you back to the channel as we explore stories that started with great moments but quickly spiraled down. Before we get into today's topic, I would like to ask that you subscribe to the channel so that you can keep up with all my updates. Now, let's get into today's story. The Osage Murders, Part 3. In the summer of 1925, a sense of urgency fills the air as Tom White, the special agent in charge of the Bureau of Investigation's field office in Houston, receives a summons from headquarters in Washington, D.C. Edgar Hoover, the newly appointed head of the Bureau, insists on a face-to-face meeting with White. Hoover's demand for professionalism and control resonates deeply with the agents under his command. With a heavy heart, White bids farewell to his beloved wife and children, swiftly packing his belongings as he embarks on his journey to the nation's capital. White, a seasoned lawman and former Texas Ranger, stands tall at 6'4", often donning the attire of a rugged cowboy. Having joined the Bureau of Investigation in 1917, White's path took an unexpected turn when a recent surgery prevented him from serving in World War I. Now, not yet 40, he finds himself part of a dwindling tribe of old frontier lawmen, fearing that he may soon become nothing more than a relic in a Wild West sideshow. Despite lacking formal training as a law enforcement officer and being unfamiliar with cutting-edge scientific techniques like fingerprinting, White's strength lies in his ability to gather facts. His measured temperament and unwavering moral compass have made him a respected lawman, firmly believing that the distinction between good and evil is a delicate one. In the summer of 1925, a sense of urgency fills the air as Tom White, the special agent in charge of the Bureau of Investigation's Houston field office, receives a summons from headquarters in Washington, D.C. Edgar Hoover, the newly appointed head of the Bureau, demands White's presence in person. With a certain level of authority and professionalism expected under Hoover's leadership, White bids farewell to his wife and children, swiftly packing his belongings and embarking on his journey to Washington. White, a former Texas Ranger and a true embodiment of an old-style lawman, stands tall at 6'4" and often dons the attire of a cowboy. Joining the Bureau of Investigation in 1917 after being unable to fight in World War I due to a recent surgery, White finds himself on the verge of becoming a relic in a disappearing tribe of old frontier lawmen. Although lacking formal training as a law enforcement officer and unfamiliar with cutting-edge scientific methods like fingerprinting, White's composed demeanor and strong moral compass have made him an exceptional lawman. He firmly believes in the fine line that separates a good man from a bad one. In 1924, amidst a backdrop of scandal and disgrace, the Attorney General of the United States appoints Edgar Hoover, a 29-year-old deputy director of the Bureau, as the acting director. Hoover, a creature of the bureaucracy who thrives on gossip, unspoken deals, and bloodless territorial wars, has no experience as a detective. However, he sets out to transform the Bureau into a modern force, purging it of incompetent and corrupt agents and mandating legal and accounting training for new recruits. By the end of the year, Hoover secures the position permanently, shaping the Bureau into a formidable monolithic force that would combat crime. So in the midst of a changing landscape at Hoover's Bureau, White finds himself feeling out of place. The Bureau is evolving, embracing a new kind of masculinity and protocol that White is not accustomed to. Back in 1923, the Bureau's former director sent an agent to Osage County to investigate a case. However, after a few weeks, the agent concluded that further investigation would be futile. Despite sending more agents, no progress was made. Things took a turn for the worse when the notorious outlaw Blackie Thompson was released to work undercover for the Bureau's investigation, only to escape, commit a bank robbery, and kill a police officer in the Osage Hills. Now, Hoover is desperate to dispel rumors about the Bureau's involvement in the Thompson affair and clear them of any blame for the failure of the larger investigation or internal corruption. In this dire situation, Hoover turns to White, a true cowboy who knows the wild ways of the West, to lead the investigation into the Osage murders. White understands the high stakes involved. If he fails, he risks being banished to a remote outpost or even pushed out of the Bureau altogether. Furthermore, many brave men who attempted to catch the killers have lost their lives. Despite these risks, White agrees to take on the job. Upon his arrival at the Oklahoma City field office in July of 1925, Tom White dives headfirst into the extensive files on the Osage murders. He meticulously sifts through the scattered pieces of data and information, hoping to uncover some sort of pattern or connection between the killings. As he delves deeper, he discovers that the victims are all wealthy Osage Indians and that 3 of them were related: Anna, Rita, and Lizzie. However, he also realizes that there is little information on Mollie, the last surviving member of her family, and wonders why no one has interviewed her. D. White also notes that there is no discernible signature to the murders. The killer has used a variety of methods, from poisonings to shootings to bombings. This leads White to believe that the perpetrator is not impulsive, but rather a calculated and patient connoisseur who has been carrying out their sinister plan for years. As White continues his investigation, he becomes acutely aware of the challenges he faces. Not only is he up against a ruthless killer, but he must also navigate a system rife with corruption and systemic racism. Despite these obstacles, White remains determined to uncover the truth. In July 1925, Tom White steps into the bustling Oklahoma City field office, ready to dive into the extensive files on the Osage murders. With determination, he meticulously sifts through the scattered puzzle pieces of information, desperately searching for any connections or patterns among the victims. As he delves deeper, a disturbing truth emerges: the wealthy Osage Indians are being deliberately targeted, and the 3 victims, Anna, Rita, and Lizzie, share a bloodline. Curiously, the files offer little insight into Mollie, the sole survivor of her family, leaving White perplexed as to why she hasn't been interviewed. Examining the files further, White discovers a chilling revelation. There is no discernible signature to these heinous crimes. The killer's methods range from poisonings to point-blank shootings to bombings, indicating a calculated and patient mind, a true mastermind of evil. White comprehends the magnitude of his adversary, not just a mere murderer, but also a pervasive atmosphere of systemic racism and a web of corruption that has deterred previous investigators through bribes and intimidation. However, White remains resolute in his pursuit of the truth. Assembling a diverse, capable, and trustworthy team, White acknowledges the presence of racism, greed, and corruption at every level of Osage County society. With a strategic plan in mind, he aims to infiltrate every corner of the town, determined to swiftly and efficiently uncover the harrowing reality behind the plight of the Osage people. White is faced with a daunting task as he begins his investigation. The disappearance of many records and lack of evidence from the crime scenes leaves him unsure of where to start. However, the Undertaker provides a glimmer of hope by allowing White to examine Anna's skull. White discovers that she was shot with a .32 or .38 caliber pistol, but the bullet was never found during the autopsy. This leads White to believe that someone at the scene must have taken it. White questions David and James Shawn, but it's impossible to determine who altered the crime scene due to the number of people present. White then begins to methodically corroborate each suspect's alibi, ruling out many suspects along the way. However, a new development arises when a woman comes forward claiming that a strange white man forced her to sign a statement. White realizes that the conspirators are not only erasing evidence, but also manufacturing it. As he continues his investigation, he keeps in mind the words of Sherlock Holmes: when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however, improbably must be the truth. Hoover, with his intense fear of germs and meticulous nature, is not one to venture out into the field. However, his insatiable desire for control over the investigation leads him to insert himself into White's work even from a distance. As July 1925 comes to a close, White shifts his complete focus onto Brian Burkhart, Mollie's brother-in-law, and the last suspect on the list for Anna Brown's murder. Despite Brian having what appears to be an airtight alibi, White dispatches his agents to verify it by interviewing Brian's uncle and aunt, who accompanied him to the musical on the night of Anna's death. To White's surprise, the couple seems nervous and hastily dismisses the agents after stating that Brian was with them. In August of the same year, White sends his undercover operatives to Ralston, a town where a lead suggests Anna Brown may have been seen in a car by a group of men outside a hotel on the main street. Previous investigators had disregarded the valuable testimony of these witnesses, leading White to suspect that they were bribed by the suspects to keep quiet. Despite the risk associated with being associated with the case, one of the witnesses and his wife agreed to speak with the investigators. They confirmed that Anna and Brian Burkhart were indeed together in a car in Ralston on the night of Anna's murder. Brian's alibi crumbles, and one of the agents informs White that Brian had lied under oath during the coroner's inquest, claiming that he had safely left Anna at her home between 4:30 and 5 p.m. White's new task is to determine the whereabouts of Anna and Brian after they left Ralston. To piece together their movements, he creates a timeline. According to the timeline, Brian and Anna visited several speakeasies between Ralston and Fairfax, indulging in drinks until 1:00 a.m. Although the details become hazy after that, multiple witnesses claim to have seen Brian and Anna accompanied by a mysterious third man that night. Row 8 of them was around 3 when a witness overheard Brian yelling at Anna to stop her foolishness after a car stopped near her house. From that point on, Anna vanishes from the timeline. However, Brian's neighbor spots him returning home at sunrise, and Brian even bribes the neighbor to keep quiet about seeing him. White ponders why Brian would harm Anna, whether he is connected to the other murders, and who this enigmatic third man could be. By the end of the summer in 1925, White begins to suspect that there is a spy within the investigation. 2 private detectives uncover and apprehend one of the informants involved in the operation, Kelsey Morrison. It becomes evident that the agent's reports are being leaked and stolen. To counter this, White starts meeting his team in secret under the cover of darkness and urges them to carry weapons for self-defense. Curiously, Anna vanishes from the timeline, but Brian's neighbor spots him returning home at sunrise. Brian even bribes the neighbor to keep quiet about seeing him. White ponders why Brian would harm Anna, whether he is connected to the other murders, and who this enigmatic third man could be. Among all the individuals involved, the private eye named Pike raises the most suspicion. Pike was initially hired by William Hale in 1921 to solve the murders, but abandoned the case due to lack of progress. And an intermediary for Pike approaches Agent Berger, claiming that Pike knows the identity of the third man and will reveal it for a hefty sum. The agents demand Pike's direct involvement. However, Pike refuses, prompting the agents to launch a manhunt for him, eventually locating him in Tulsa. During their interrogation of Pike, he unveils a hidden aspect of the case. He confesses that he was never truly hired to solve Anna Brown's murder. Instead, his role was to cover up Brian's whereabouts on the night of the crime and help him establish an alibi. Pike discloses that his orders came directly. In a stunning turn of events, White comes to a realization that shakes the very foundation of the case. If Pike's claims are true, it means that Hale, the revered king of the Osage Hills, has been deceiving everyone for years. This revelation hints at a sinister and elaborate plot that goes beyond what anyone could have imagined, but that's not all. Pike also discloses that during his meetings with Hale and Brian, there was another person present, Ernest Burkhart. Interestingly, Burkhart was always cautious not to discuss the case in front of his wife, Mollie. As September of 1925 rolls around, White's curiosity intensifies. He begins to wonder if Bill Smith, Mollie's brother-in-law, who was tragically killed, had started uncovering the truth behind the murders. Could it be that a larger conspiracy connected to the family's immense oil wealth was at play? These questions linger in White's mind, especially considering the timing of Bill's death. Determined to dig deeper, White meets with the nurse who cared for Bill during his hospital stay after the explosion. Astonishingly, she reveals that shortly before his demise, Bill had meetings with his lawyer and doctors James and David Sheen. The doctors had even asked the nurse to leave the room. During their conversation, intrigued, White decides to question the doctors. They claim that they contacted the lawyer because they suspected Bill might disclose information about the explosion's culprits. However, they insist that Bill never mentioned anything about who blew him up in their presence. White's suspicions grow even stronger. In a crucial turn of events, White confronts Smith's lawyer. To his surprise, the lawyer divulges a shocking revelation. While lying in the hospital, Bill confessed to having only two enemies in the world: William K. Hale and his nephew, Ernest Burkhart. This revelation implicates Hale and Burkhart in a web of deceit and raises further questions about their involvement in the murders. Shown brothers, already dubious characters in White's eyes, are now exposed as co-conspirators in a cunning scheme to claim a portion of Bill Smith's estate. It becomes clear that Bill's fortune, acquired through his marriage to Rita, is at the center of this intricate web of deception. The plot thickens, and White is determined to uncover the truth, no matter how deep the rabbit hole goes. The Osage tribe's guardianship policy, assigned by the government, is a way to keep them oppressed and to excuse the government's negligence towards the abuses committed by these guardians. The White realizes the extent of racism and corruption in Oklahoma's white society, where the Osage tribe has no allies to turn to. The conspiracies and thefts involve people from all walks of life who are willing to do anything to exploit the tribe. White's investigation leads him to William Hale, who seems to control everything in the area and has a suspicious history of insurance fraud. Hale became the beneficiary of Henry Roan's life insurance policy, despite having a clear motive for wanting him dead. White discovers that Hale pushed Roan to take the expensive policy and make him the beneficiary with no proof of the debt. The doctor who examined Roan was also recruited by Hale, showing the extent of his influence. As White delves deeper into the investigation, he uncovers a shocking revelation. It turns out that when the first insurance company rejected Roan's application, Hale didn't give up. Instead, he went to another company and presented a fabricated creditor's note, falsely claiming that Roan owed him money. White's team of analysts later discovered that the note had been tampered with to make Hale's claim appear more legitimate. This deceitful act raises suspicions about Hale's involvement in the murder. During one of Roan's medical examinations, a doctor made a dark joke asking if Bill planned to kill this Indian. To everyone's surprise, Hale responded with laughter, saying, "Hell yes." This disturbing incident further adds to the growing doubts surrounding Hale's character. White also uncovers a disturbing bias in the local law enforcement's investigation. Instead of considering Hale as a suspect, they focused their efforts on building a case against Roy Bunch, who had been having an affair with Roan's wife. Hale even approached Bunch and urged him to leave town, offering him money for his journey. However, Bunch's friends advised him against accepting the offer as it would make him appear guilty. White begins to question the validity of the claims against Bunch, suspecting that they may be false and unfair. Although White has gathered circumstantial evidence pointing towards Hale's involvement in Henry Roan's murder, he lacks concrete proof such as fingerprints or eyewitness testimonies. Determined to find the missing piece of the puzzle, White stumbles upon a peculiar detail. Before obtaining the life insurance policy on Roan, Hale attempted to purchase Roan's head right, which was his share in the tribe's mineral trust. When he faced legal barriers in acquiring it, White begins to believe that Hale resorted to the sinister plot of the life insurance murder. White is well aware that there is only one legal avenue for someone outside the Osage tribe to acquire a headrance inheritance. As he delves into the records of the murder victims, he notices a disturbing trend. More and more head rights are being passed down to a single individual, Mollie Burkhart, who happens to be married to Hale's nephew. Ernest, one of White's agents, even goes so far as to describe Mollie as being completely under Hale's control. It becomes clear to White that the sequence of the murders is part of a calculated scheme to ensure that Mollie becomes the sole inheritor of a significant number of hedge rights. The ultimate goal is to eliminate Mollie, allowing all of her family's wealth to be up for grabs. Anna Brown, who was divorced and childless, left her entire fortune to her mother Lizzie. In turn, Lizzie bequeathed her head rights to her surviving daughters Mollie and Rita. Rita, along with Bill, was the third target because their will stated that if they died simultaneously, their head rights would pass on to Mollie. However, since Bill survived the explosion and left most of his hedge right to his own family, this part of the plan failed. Nevertheless, the majority of the family's hedge rights now belong to Mollie, whose wealth is under the control of Ernest, supposedly under the influence of his uncle Hale. Here's what puzzles White is whether Ernest's marriage to Mollie, which took place 4 years before Anna's murder, was part of the plot from the beginning, or if Hale somehow convinced Ernest to betray her at a later point. Despite the progress made by White and his team, they still lack any concrete evidence or reliable witnesses to use against Hale. Without a solid case, White understands that he cannot take down a man who is shielded by a facade of respectability and wields immense power in Osage County. To strengthen their case, White and his agents compile a list of individuals under their control, including Scott Mathis, the owner of Big Hill Trading Company, as well as members of the police force, the mayor of Fairfax, and various local and federal officials. White knows that the fight for justice has only just begun, but he is also aware that Hoover is growing impatient back in Washington. Part 3 of the Osage murders has come to a close. Stay tuned for the final part of the case, which will be uploaded shortly. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button to receive notifications when new content is posted. If you've read Killers of the Flower Moon, share your thoughts on the book and movie in the comments below. Until next time, take care of yourself